Every afternoon when the sunlight slants through the windows and the clock strikes 2, this Chinese caregiver begins her secret operation. The sedative takes effect silently, and her Korean employer drifts into unconsciousness. How movements flow in water, two identical phones change hands in a seamless exchange. The outside world remains oblivious to her existence. Like a phantom, she navigates through surveillance blind spot, following routes she's scouted countless times before, vanishing into the city's periphery, her destination the remote cliff face. On the hidden side of these treacherous rocks, beyond human sight, she hones her climbing skills day after day. The stones leave bloody marks on her fingertips, but her eyes hold only one goal: conquering this wall of stone in 20 minutes. Finally, she waits for that moment. When her husband arrives as usual to challenge nature's heights, he never suspects that death is already approaching from another direction. From the cliff's shadow side, she begins her deadly pursuit, each climbing motion fueled by vengeance. The crevice at the summit becomes her perfect hiding place. The exhausted man finally reaches the top, settling on a boulder to savor the rush of conquering the peak. But then, a shadow strikes like lightning from above. In his terror, he instinctively reaches out to grab something, but when he recognizes the face of his attacker, life's flame has already been extinguished. At 6 in the evening, as the sun sets, the climber's body is discovered. What was once a handsome face has become a feast for insects. Meanwhile, that woman calmly uses her employer's phone to report to the domestic service company, weaving her perfect alibi. Detective Ashi Jun is assigned to this case. He assumes it's just another routine mountain accident, unaware that he's about to step into an elaborate web of deception, an abyss that will consume countless lives and utterly destroy his own. The crime scene reveals clues about the victim's identity. Expensive possessions all bear the same engraved initial, exposing an intense possessiveness. The phone's wallpaper shows a photo, an elderly man embracing a young woman. At their first meeting, Jun mistakes her for the victim's daughter. But as they sit face to face, the vast age gap and the woman's complete absence of grief trigger his instincts. However, what Jun doesn't realize is that while he's studying this woman, she's equally analyzing him. Through every micro-expression, every subtle gesture, she's already mapped his personality: a monotonous life, intense curiosity, and a yearning to explore the unknown. In those few minutes of confrontation, she's already designed a precision rap tailored specifically for him. First move, she deliberately displays the wounds on her hands, transforming herself from suspect to victim. Sure enough, when Jun's gaze captures those shocking scars, he instinctively clicks the camera, adding her to his list of key suspects. Her file reveals her background: a Chinese woman who smuggled herself into Korea, marrying a man in his 60s to obtain legal status. Yet marriage became a nightmare. Hospital records show monthly treatments, every inch of skin covered by clothing bearing wounds, even her most private areas branded with her husband's name. This backstory helps Jun understand why she appears so indifferent after her husband's death. This seemingly reasonable explanation successfully awakens his deep-seated compassion. Investigation at the Domestic Service Center further confirms her innocence. Security footage and work records show she never left her employer's home on the day of the incident, even personally using the employer's phone to report her work status. But professional instinct doctors Jun to secretly observe this mysterious woman. He watches her gentle care of the elderly, sees the captivating smile on her face. This aura of kindness enchants him, and his curiosity about her grows stronger. The biopsy brings new lead skin tissue from another person is found under the victim's fingernails. When DNA samples are required, she shows no panic but instead implements the next phase of her seduction plan. Our gaze seems to casually sweep over the wedding ring on Jun's hand. Perhaps Jun himself doesn't realize it, but his guilty expression and nervous withdrawal at his hand are all captured in her observant eyes. Confirming his interest, she launches her offensive. Peeling off the bandage on her hand, she helplessly explains the source of her wounds: beatings for refusing to accompany her husband mountain climbing. As she speaks, she actually lifts her skirt in front of Jun, revealing the scars on her legs. Jun instinctively moves to photograph the evidence, but feels awkward due to propriety. In this moment, the stern interrogation room transforms into an intimate conversation space between friends. When Jun asks why she dislikes mountain climbing, She pulls out her phone and uses a translation app to input an ancient Chinese philosophy. Confucius said the wise find joy in water, the benevolent in mountains. I am not benevolent. Thus I love the sea. Reading the text on screen, Ashi Yijun unconsciously echoes in a low voice, the ocean represents tranquility and freedom. This strikes the softest part of his heart. Her love for the sea creates a profound spiritual resonance with H.A. Jun, like invisible threads binding him ever tighter. When the timing is right, she reverses their roles. As Asha Yijun inquires about the day of the incident, she deflects, deliberately making Korean language errors, saying single instead of only, and smiling shyly and explaining that her Korean is pure. When she doesn't know how to express something, she uses smiles instead. In this moment, she appears beautiful, literary, and mysterious, while also displaying charming playfulness. This move makes Sasha Yijun even more eager to understand her deeply, wanting to protect this fragile woman. Little does he know, this is all part of her carefully orchestrated performance. During lunch, Asha Yijun privately orders her a luxurious sashimi platter. Colleagues outside the interrogation room stare wide-eyed, unable to believe what they're witnessing. After the meal, they harmoniously clear the dishes and wipe the table, every movement perfectly coordinated like long-time lovers. Even their cooperation in disposing of trash appears naturally effortless. Asha Yijun thoughtfully prepares toiletries for her and hands her a fresh waterproof bandage. At this moment, she knows that in Asha Yijun's mind, her suspicion is quietly dissipated. However, Asha Yijun's partner always feels something isn't quite right. Despite Asha Yijun's stubborn denials, surveillance work must continue according to protocol. As night falls, Asha Yijun grips binoculars in the shadows, observing her every move. He watches her tenderly care for the elderly, patiently feed stray cats, occasionally taking bites of ice cream. Watching her sleep peacefully. Asha Yijun, long plagued by insomnia, mysteriously falls into deep sleep in his car. When she discovers him the next morning during her outing, she not only graciously takes several photos of him, but also smiles and extends her hand in morning greeting. This warm gesture keeps Sachai Yijun in good spirits all day, even mimicking her enthusiastic greetings with colleagues. This unusual change leaves colleagues stunned. The usual Asha Yijun is notoriously serious and rigid. Night falls again, then Asha Yijun returns to her residential complex. Her cat suddenly brings a dead crow. Seeing this, she immediately and carefully buries the crow, then gently strokes the cat while murmuring something. Hidden in the shadows, Asha Yijun hurriedly uses a translation app to record her words. Those naked confessions strike like pebbles into a calm lake, creating ripples in his monotonous life and stirring tremors in his heart. At this point, he can no longer distinguish whether he's surveilling her for work or simply yearning to see her. He doesn't know she's already discovered his stalking. Every action is a performance tailored for him, since she consistently shows no flaws. Asha Yijun plans to close the case as suicide. But just then, his partner brings shocking news. They'd discovered the real reason she smuggled herself into Korea. This news instantly throws Asha Yijun into turmoil. After an internal struggle, he directly sends her the file, desperately wanting to know the truth. But she's already figured out his thoughts. Replying simply, "Come find me." Asha Yijun immediately tidies his appearance and races to her home, completely forgetting his identity as a police officer and her position as a suspect. However, upon entering, he still manages to maintain some rationality, pressing her about the matricide. She calmly pours tea for Asha Yijun and begins to tell her story. Her mother had been gravely ill, tormented by unbearable pain, desperately begging her nurse daughter to use medicine to end her suffering. She hoped to have her ashes scattered on a certain mountain in her homeland of Korea. Out of heartbreak for her mother, unable to bear watching her die without dignity, she finally administered the fatal medication, while also keeping the same drugs for herself, now hidden in the lid of her mother's urn. This was why she smuggled herself into Korea, planning to fulfill her mother's dying wish before ending her own life, though ultimately she couldn't bring herself to go through with it. Looking at this woman of tragic fate before him, Asha Yijun's heart fills with compassion. At this moment, she presses her advantage, producing several letters insisting her husband committed suicide. Her husband had served as a Korean customs immigration interviewer for 20 years. The letters revealed he'd been reported multiple times for taking bribes and chose to end his life under unbearable pressure. Now the scales in Ashi Ijun's heart tip completely. He doesn't even verify the letters' authenticity, instead asking personal questions knowing her husband's corrupt character. Why did she still marry him? She timely reveals her past suffering during those smuggling days, 10 whole days in the sweltering summer heat, confined in a stifling fish hold, drinking it, relieving herself in the same space, covered in filth, her entire being swaying like a madwoman. He had seen her in that state, smelled her odor, heard her story. The voice coming through the translation app helps Seiche Ijun deeply understand her former helplessness and despair. But before Ijun can respond, she begins the next phase of her plan, her words full of hints and probes. Who do you watch at night? Does your wife know? This single sentence lays bare the subtle feelings between them, forcing Ashi Ijun to confront his emotions toward her. The next day, the victim's company supervisor approaches Ashi Ijun, claiming they found the victim's suicide note in his office. Based on handwriting and content, the victim indeed took his own life due to being reported. Now Ijun can finally close the case with peace of mind. However, at the celebration banquet, his partner drinks himself into a stupor. He simply doesn't believe this was suicide. How could a woman capable of killing her own mother have nothing to do with her husband's death? He's also witnessed all of Ijun's changes these past days. He thought Ijun was the most justice-seeking police officer, different from those who just go through the motions, but instead he's been bewitched by a woman. Eventually everyone parts on bad terms, leaving Ijun sitting alone, reflecting on whether his personal feelings truly affected his judgment. Just then she calls his disgruntled partner had actually gone to her home and caused a scene, leaving the place in chaos. Filled with guilt, Ijun rushes to remove his partner. No one anticipated that this careless remark would become a prophetic statement. Seeing her pitiful state, Ijun silently cleans until deep into the night. After finishing, he returns all her husband's belongings, an action that signifies the case is completely closed. They are no longer police officer and suspect, but her scheming is far from over. She lifts her face, eyes gleaming with cunning, once again tugging in Ijun's heartstring. Under her intricately connected manipulations, Ijun completely succumbs to this dangerous romance. At RIN, he brings her to his rental apartment. Under the warm yellow lights, he personally prepares a fragrant Chinese fried rice for her. Without reservation, he tells her about the cases he's investigating, completely abandoning the police force's strict confidentiality principles. When his gaze sweeps over her husband's photo on the wall, Ijun looks slightly embarrassed, while she just smiles dismissively, as if that past were already ancient history. Even more shocking, when Ijun mentions a difficult case, she casually flips through the files for a moment before astutely pointing out that the criminal should be hiding at his girlfriend's house. Her clear analysis leads Ijun operation with his partner the next day. Indeed, the criminal is hiding at his girlfriend's house. They encounter the suspect and chase him all the way to the rooftop. Cornered, the criminal is shot in the leg by Ijun but suddenly pulls out scissors and holds them to his throat. This man had discovered his girlfriend's betrayal with his brother a month ago, and in rage had stabbed his rival to death. Unable to accept both his girlfriend's betrayal and his own criminal act, he fell into extreme pain and despair, ultimately choosing to end it all by jumping from the building. Witnessing a living being perish before his eyes makes Ijun feel he failed in his duty as a police officer. Filled with self-blame and deep self-doubt, his insomnia worsens. In her eyes, this presents the perfect opportunity. Late at night, she arrives at Ijun's home with concern written on her face, her eyes full of worry. Then she lights the gas and burns all photos and materials, symbolically ending the case. While appearing to relieve Ijun's psychological burden, she's actually seizing the chance to destroy important materials about her deceased husband, including photos Ijun had secretly taken of her. When Ijun tries to stop her, she immediately employs her feminine wiles, making Ijun blush like a shy teenager. Finally, only a few photos of her remain, as he lets her handle everything else. At this moment, their coming together feels natural. However, she doesn't rush to attack but instead uses her nursing expertise to help Ijun sleep, further integrating into his psychological world. Ijun believes he's finally found his spiritually compatible soulmate, so they tacitly begin living like lovers. They meet in desolate places, share lipstick to feel each other's warmth, Her every glance, every smile deeply enchants Sei Shai-Jun. Each time he holds her calloused hands, Shai-Jun carefully applies hand cream. He thinks these scars are marks from her suffering in China, not knowing they're evidence of her planning practice and murder planning. To better integrate into her life, Shai-Jun helps care for the elderly whenever possible. One day the old man suddenly remarked, "Sa-chan, Ijun's hands are much softer than yours. You didn't have calluses when you first arrived." This comment sets off alarm bells in Shai-Jun's mind. Then the old man pulls out his glitchy phone, asking for help cleaning it up. Shai-Jun is shocked to discover this phone is identical to hers. Instantly, a climbing app catches Shai-Jun's attention. Yosabra steps, with a date matching exactly when her husband died. Looking at the old man's immobile legs, Shai-Jun incredulously asks where he and she went that day. But the old man looks completely bewildered. Shai-Jun feels like he's fallen into an ice cave. He finally understands that the dementia-stricken old man has no idea his phone was taken, and she likely used this to fabricate the perfect alibi. To verify his suspicion, Shai-Jun follows the route she might have taken, climbing arduously from the mountain's backside. When he reaches the summit, battered and bruised, his phone clearly shows Yaosamba steps. Thinking of her calloused hands, Shai-Jun is absolutely certain she orchestrated her husband's murder. How could someone with an angelic face be a killer? Even knowing the full truth, Shai-Jun still can't bring himself to take the evidence to the police station, instead choosing to bring the old man's phone home. Faced with Shai-Jun's questioning, she makes no attempt to hide anything. She killed him because she couldn't endure the long-term domestic violence. Reporting to police would mean deportation back to China, and her husband's brazen abuse stemmed from knowing exactly this. She had slipped a suicide note into his briefcase while he was at work, and she had pasted together the accusation letters one by one, though their contents were completely true. This chills Shai-Jun to the bone. His beloved woman's mind is so calculating. This makes him recall the day his partner trashed her room, and Shai-Jun suddenly realizes that from their first meeting, the deliberate wounds, intentional language errors, every gentle smile, everything was a carefully designed trap, and he was already deeply ensnared with no escape. Even knowing the truth, Shai-Jun still can't bring himself to bring her to justice. Shai-Jun's world crumbles before the truth, yet he still instinctively covers up her crimes. When he speaks of sinking the evidence to the ocean floor, he's completely unaware that behind him, she's quietly pressed the record button. This woman he once considered his soulmate is dragging him into the abyss through the coldest means possible. Faced with Shai-Jun's deep affection, she only wants to placate him through feminine manipulation, unable to truly understand his anguish. After Shai-Jun leaves in despair, she opens the translation app to search for the Korean words of breakdown he just spoke. When she sees they mean collapse and shatter, her heart suddenly experiences an unprecedented flutter. Shai-Jun shattered himself to protect her. This moves her, within saying "I love you." In this moment she truly realizes she's already fallen deeply in love with this man through his gentleness and understanding. But it's all too late. A whole year passes swiftly. Having violated his police duties and principles of justice, a guilt-ridden Shai-Jun develops severe sleep disorders, getting less than 3 hours of sleep nightly. He returns to work in the small county where his wife lives. Sometimes, the fate between people is just this miraculous. One day while grocery shopping with his wife, Shai-Jun runs directly into her, also shopping. She's now married to a wealthy man. Perhaps through feminine intuition, his wife immediately dislikes her upon first sight. Instead, her husband catches the wife's attention. Being a financial program host, she unconsciously strikes up conversation and even exchanges contact information. Meanwhile, Shai-Jun stares intently at her. This past year he's lived like a walking corpse, but seeing her, he seems to come alive again. Through complex gazes mixing longing, joy, and sorrow, they ultimately suppress their emotions and hurriedly part ways. But strangely, that very evening, her husband calls Asha,